Take Care of Your Body by Rye. Healthy habits are your heart's desire. Keep listening to see what's next.
I hope you're smiling because it's me, Rye. Today, I'm with a very special guest. I'm with Chief of General Cardiology at Memorial Healthcare System, Dr. Ralph Levy, and he's also one of my favorite people. Hi, Dr. Levy. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Riley, nice to see you. A
Yeah.
pleasure to be here.
It's nice to see you. So, I want to have a conversation with you about heart health. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, let's educate my listeners on one of the most important systems in the body. So, my first question is, what are the most common heart conditions people experience in their daily lives, and how can they be prevented or managed?
Okay, I think that the one that everybody thinks about all the time are heart attacks, right? That's what, when you talk about the heart, everybody thinks and worries about that. But in reality, the most common condition that we treat really is high blood pressure. That's the one that most people have. It's very prevalent in the United States and is one of the risk factors actually to proceed and having a heart attack. So I would say high blood pressure is the most common that we see. And then, of course, we see patients to try to prevent heart attacks, or if they already have had a heart attack, try to prevent a second one and to treat the different conditions that may lead to the condition. The heart is a very interesting organ. If you go like this with your fist, go ahead. That's the size of your heart. That's it. It's not a very big organ, but it's an organ that beats approximately 100,000 times a day. If you think about it, it's about 30 million to 35 million times in a year. By the time you get to be in your 60s and 70s, it has beaten close to between 2.5 to 3 billion times. So it's an amazing organ for that size. Our lives depend on it. So not only we have to take good care of it, but if something goes bad, we have to repair it. And the heart has different components. It's in reality a muscle that pushes oxygenated blood to the rest of our bodies, and then blood without oxygen to the lungs to get oxygen. And in order to do that, there's a system of valves in the heart that direct blood from one chamber to the next. There are four chambers in the heart. So anything can go bad with any of the four valves, anything can go bad with the muscle of the heart. And the heart itself has a system of arteries or little tubes that bring oxygenated blood to the muscle itself so it can work. And that can go bad as well. We can have blockages in those arteries. Those are the ones that when they get blocked, we get heart attacks, etc., etc. So, and in order to put everything together and everything to work in order, there's an electrical system in the heart as well that tells everything to work at the proper time in the cardiac cycle. So the heart is a little bit like a building, you know. They have the muscle, they have different valves, which is like the plumbing system. It's an electrical system, which is the electrical system. And it does this billions of times in our lives without, most of the time requiring repairs. So it's an amazing, amazing organ.
Wow. So, I have a question. Maybe to be a little funny. So, let's say like your fist gets bigger, your heart doesn't get bigger, right?
No, it does not.
Wow.
But it can get. Well, it gets that's not true. As you get older, of course, if you're a child, it's a very small heart. As you get older, your arm, your hand will stay the same size. So it'll be after 18, 20, your heart will stay the same size usually,
Okay.
unless it gets sick, in which it can get enlarged in a bad way.
Okay. That makes sense. So, what are some lifestyle changes that can help reduce the risk of heart disease?
Well, I always tell my patients, Riley, that the best way of treating heart disease is not to have any. You know, so the best way to treat heart disease is it starts very young. We call that primordial care. Not even preventative care is primordial. Is in very young kids and young adults like yourself. We want to eat properly. I know you're a big fan of that. We
Absolutely.
need to exercise regularly as well. One of the problems we have in this country is the inactivity that we have these days. In years past, we didn't have, smartphones that we're looking at all the time. We didn't have computers we're looking at all the time. We didn't have video games we're looking at all the time. People used to go outside, stay outside most of the day in weekends, but we don't do that anymore for the most part. We like become a very sedentary society, and a society that is eating poorly. The number of patients, people in the United States that are either obese or overweight is approximately 60 to 70% of the entire population. That is an
Wow.
enormous number. So the best way of avoiding heart disease is to not having heart disease. The best way of not having heart disease is to eat healthy, exercise, and avoiding, all that bad stuff like fast food or just overeating in general.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think it's really sad that a lot of people will go to, what's convenient and what's right there instead of taking the time to make meals and, think about how will this impact my health in the long run. So
Correct.
my next question is, can you explain, how nutrition plays a role in the heart and, preventing heart disease and just really taking care of your overall body in general?
Yeah, I think that it goes back to the fact that poor nutrition will lead to bad stuff, right? So everybody talks about cholesterol, is my cholesterol high? Sometimes that is genetically determined, meaning that we inherited a tendency to have bad cholesterol from our parents. But in many cases, it's really acquired, meaning that it's what we put in your mouth that defines who we are. So if you're gonna be eating in McDonald's or Burger King or Wendy's or KFC or any of those chains day in and day out, and you're oversizing everything and eating sugary drinks and food that doesn't have significant caloric value, then you may end up having different things, including high blood pressure, which I just mentioned, the formation of cholesterol plaques in the arteries of your heart, and that will lead eventually to heart disease in various ways, from heart attacks to something called heart failure. We don't want to have any of those things. So it all starts with nutrition. There are now efforts to start what I just told you about primordial care by giving lessons through Sesame Street, for example. That has been tried in Colombia, has been tried in Spain, in the United States a little bit, of introducing healthy tips for kids, so the kids actually go and convince their parents to eat healthier. So that's some of the stuff that we're doing.
That just made my whole day. Wow, that's awesome. And I do really think like it's important and like you have such an important job where, you know a lot about, obviously heart and how to take care of your overall body. But when you pair, your profession with a dietitian, I think it's, a role for success. And, I've been interested in looking into the cardiac dietitian field because I think that heart health and overall nutrition plays such a big role. So that question was very important for me to touch on with you. My
That is
next one,
awesome, actually,
yeah,
that you care
absolutely,
about that.
right? Right. It's very important. So my next one is, can you explain how genetics, I know you mentioned, like cholesterol and different, heart disease can be passed down. Can you explain the role of how genetics and heart disease, can cause issues for individuals and what steps you can do if you're in that position?
Yes and no. So genetics plays a role. The role for most people is undefined. In genetics, Rylan, to give you a very quick lesson in genetics, will take exactly 1 minute. Most of the things we can identify by examining the genetic makeup of somebody. The bad stuff is only one gene and it's very rare. So we don't see that very often. It is likely that most of the conditions we talked about, like high blood pressure, diabetes, coronary artery disease, that is blockages in the areas of the heart failure when the heart doesn't pump enough, are a combination of something called polygenetics, meaning very a lot of genes that contribute a little and are difficult to modify, plus your environment is called epigenetics. So it's a combination of not only who you are, how you're made because of your genes, but also the environment that you're in. If you look, for example, at kids in a place like some places in Europe, Scandinavian countries, where they're outside biking and exercising all the time. They're thin. They don't eat like us, and the number of patients who are obese in those countries is very small, and they have perhaps less high blood pressure, less heart disease than we have. If you see the same Scandinavian descent kids in our country, it's a different story because they'll be heavier because of the diet that we use, stuff like that. So genetics plays a role, but it's a small role, I think,
Absolutely.
for most
I
people.
agree. I agree. So, my next question is, how does sleep quality impact the heart?
Oh, in many ways, you're talking to somebody who's chronically sleep deprived, so hopefully not a lot. But yeah, we call that disordered sleep, disorders of sleeping. There are several. There's one that everybody talks about called sleep apnea that usually has to do with weight. Patients that are overweight, they'll tend to, their airway is very thick as well, and they'll tend to collapse when we're sleeping. Those are the people that we hear snoring heavily at night. And they can lead to problems like, again, high blood pressure and different disorders of the rhythm of the heart. In addition to that, poor sleeping or poor sleep hygiene will lead to things like fatigue. When we're tired, we don't exercise as much as we should. Um, when we are tired as well, we cannot concentrate. We tend to eat poorly. So, having good sleep hygiene is incredibly important for us.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. My next question is, can you emphasize the importance of getting a regular checkup of your heart?
I think that that's very important, but I think it goes more than that. I think it's a general checkup of yourself in general. We want to have checkups when you are young, like you, into our 20s and 30s, once a year, once every couple of years, to make sure that our weight is where it's supposed to be, to make sure that we're exercising as much as we're supposed to be, to make sure that our blood work is where it needs to be. We have seen an epidemic rising of diabetes in this country, and diabetes in young patients, as young as you, in their teens, in the 20s, early 30s, because of the epidemics of obesity. The epidemic of obesity in this country is terrible. I've coined a name called cardio obesity. It's
Wow.
like obesity causing all kinds of cardiac disorders. It's a difficult topic because there's a lot of issues with this on a societal basis. We want to make sure that we avoid things like, fat shaming and stuff like that. It's unfortunately something that we see a lot, particularly in our young population. We want to make sure that we are super delicate with that, that we're super sympathetic with those of us who are overweight. But we cannot run away from this, and we cannot ignore it, and we cannot just say it is okay for you to be heavy and obese, because the truth of the matter is that it's not. In the end, there's a price to be paid for this, and if we're not cognizant of that, we'll end up, with problems later on in life like high blood pressure, diabetes, that sleep apnea that I mentioned, etc., etc. So being absolutely sympathetic, being absolutely supportive, helping each other, but working together in reversing that trend because it's not a healthy trend.
Absolutely. So the first step is to get a checkup, and if you need to go see a cardiologist like yourself, then you take the steps to do so.
Absolutely.
So my next question, well, it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's a question, but can you kind of touch on other conditions that impact the heart? I've been very open with my listeners about my autonomic dysfunction, so if you want to mention that, you can. But just overall, how other conditions that maybe you wouldn't want to put a name on, being a cardiac issue in itself can impact the heart.
Well, you'll be surprised that the heart is what we call an innocent bystander a lot, meaning there are plenty of other conditions that can impact the heart. And I can give you a very long list. There are patients who have these things called rheumatological disorders. Maybe you heard the word lupus somewhere, or rheumatoid arthritis. They can affect the heart. Infections can infect the heart. It can be viruses, it can be bacteria, thyroid problems, endocrine disorders. You heard about thyroid conditions can affect the heart. Diabetes itself can affect the heart. Not being healthy, drinking a lot of alcohol or abusing drugs such as cocaine or methamphetamines can affect the heart as well. Um, there can be conditions, let me think, what else? Genetic conditions that affect muscles. called muscular dystrophies can affect the heart as well. We talk about high blood pressure. So there's plenty of conditions that can affect the heart. The heart doesn't live in a bubble. Is the most, well, I guess one of the most important organs in our body, and everything that affects other parts of the heart of the body can affect the heart as well. So we have to be very cognizant of that. In your case, dysautonomia is a condition of the nervous system. In the nervous system, our nervous system, our brain, there's a particular system that controls all the things you don't think about, like your blood pressure, your heart rate, uh, when we go to the bathroom, when we poop, when we pee, when we do all those things. This is the nervous system that controls that, and there can be disorders of that as well. So yeah, pretty much everything affects the heart.
The heart is like the home of the body. Everything kind of surrounds it. I love the way that you painted that. Now I'm gonna have to get you a shirt that says that. So my last question for you is, what is one thing you want everyone listening to know about the heart and heart health in general? Anything that you want to leave listeners with today?
I think I'm going to go back to my first statements. I think that we want to be riling, all of us, which means we want to be very cognizant of our diets. We need to change that dynamic. If I had one word of wisdom, is that the best way of not having heart disease, or avoiding heart disease, is to start very early when we're young. We need to alter this dynamic in which 70% of our country is either overweight or obese. We need to reverse this curve of ever increasing diabetes, because that ends up in heart disease. Patients with diabetes die of heart disease, not of diabetes. So in order to do that, we need to change our diets fundamentally, and we need to exercise. It's very hard to do, Raylene, if you are a middle class family with both parents working really hard, and the parents are exhausted when they come home. Who's going to cook? Who's going to make sure that things are healthy? It's hard, but it's not undoable. It requires some planning
Absolutely.
at the beginning of the week, and pre-preparing perhaps some of the meals and stuff like that, and educating our kids in there are certain things they need to eat, emphasizing physical activity. It requires for us to insist that in our schools we have healthy choices. Unfortunately, many cases that is not the case. There's a political aspect to this, unfortunately. But if we want to change this dynamic, if we want to bend the curve and get the country healthier, we need to start with podcasts like yours, in which you inform your listeners about how important it is for us to do the right thing.
Thank you. That's so sweet. But now we have a goal. So me and you are gonna make sure that there's healthier food in schools for kids, heart health and nutrition by Rylan and Dr. Levy. There we go.
I'll be your follower.
Oh, that's so sweet. So actually, I have one more thing I want to ask you. Is there any certain diet you like to kind of encourage your patients to gravitate towards for heart health?
Yeah, so the diet we always advise is something called the Mediterranean diet.
I love that one.
Yeah, the Mediterranean diet is a fantastic diet because it's the only diet that in clinical trials has been shown to actually decrease heart disease and actually improve survival. So just check it out. It's called Mediterranean diet.
Thank you so much for joining me. You made my whole day. You're the best. I truly think so highly of you, and I think you're going to educate a lot of people.
The honor is mine, Riley.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Levy.
See you
Bye.
later.
See
Bye.
you. Thanks for listening to this new episode of the Take Care of Your Body by Rye podcast. Remember to take care of your body, there's only one of you, and make sure to get a regular checkup with your physician. As always, with love, Rye.